APIs will become more and more important and very useful for us Wi-Fi engineers, but they can be intimidating if you've never used them. So in this series of episodes, I'm introducing how the Mist API work by creating very simple Python scripts. So we will go over the Mist API documentation, explain the code, and then we will run this script together so we can study the results. If you like this content, please give the video a like and consider subscribing if you don't want to miss out on any upcoming video. Thank you very much, and let's get started. In this episode, I will show you how to create a new SSID profile or a new WLAN profile, as they call it, on the Mist side of things. Okay, so I'll show you. Together we'll create a new SSID with a simple PSK for the authentication. Right, we'll define the name, we'll define the band on which we want to create this SSID, and we are going to create this SSID in a specific Mist site. Okay, so first I'll show you the results. So let me show you the script. So right now I'll go into my terminal. In this folder, you'll see that I have my script here, the create WLAN.py script, and I have my config file. In my config file, I have everything that I need to make the API call to authenticate myself. And I also have all the details on this new SSID. Okay, the name, the band, and so on. So let's see what happens when I run this script. So I will run it with Python, create the name of the script, create WLAN.py, and then I will feed the config file as my parameter here. I run it, and then here what I have is, I have a message telling me that, SemFio Lab WLAN was created. So SemFio Lab is actually the name of my SSID that just got created, and it's giving me the ID that Mist just sent me for that specific SSID. Okay, so let me show you also the interface on my, my GUI. So this is the site that I have here for my lab, and as you can see, the new site that I just got created appeared here when I refresh the page. And as you can see, I have a whole bunch of other WLAN profiles that I've created here, working on my stuff. But here, this is pretty much what we're doing. We're, under network WLANs, this is what we're doing. We're creating those profiles. If I click on SemFio Lab, I will see that I have my, my PSK, and then I'll see that it's a 5 gigahertz SSID. Okay, and I did all of this using an API, and I did all of this using a Python script. Okay, so let me show you the Python script, and I'll show you which API call I've used to make this happen. Actually, if you remember, if I go back to the API documentation, if you remember the previous episode where we listed all the SSIDs part of a specific site, we're actually going to use the same URL. We're just going to use the different methods. So to list all the SSID, we use the get methods, where we're asking, Mist to list or to send us all the data related to all the WLAN profile. If you want to create one, or if you want to create a new WLAN profile, instead of using the get method, you use the post method, and the post will pretty much, create a new one, on the Mist database. Okay, so you use the post method to send your URL, and along with your API call, you will send all the data related to the new site. Pretty much how you want to configure that new site along with your API call, and then Mist will just add that to the database if everything is okay. Okay, so if I show you again, the API call, it's under site, and you have to click on WLAN right here. If you click on WLAN, it will give you, the URL that you need to use to make the call. Right? In this case, we're going to have to specify the site ID, and then we specify that we use the keyword WLANs at the end, right? And we send that along with the post method and along with the specific configuration of the new site. So let's get into the code, and let me show you how we make this happen. So as usual, on the left I have my script, on the right I have my config file. I will quickly go over the config file. So as you can see, I have first section, just as any script I do. Here in this series, I have the API details that I need. In this case, we won't need the org ID, but we will need the token and the MIS URL. I also have the detail regarding the site ID, right? So here in this case, we will need the site ID. So I have my site ID. So I have the site ID in which I want to create my new SSID. And then I have all the detail related to that new WLAN profile. So you see I have the name, I have the type of authentication, which is PSK in this case. I have a super secure password here for my PSK. And then here I'm specifying one more argument, which is the host name underscore IE. And this will pretty much configure the access point to advertise its name, when it's configured. So it will advertise this its name in the beacon frame that advertise that specific SSID. Okay, host name information element. Okay, set it to true, and then here the band is specified to 5. If you don't do anything, by default it's both, so it's on both 2.5. Here I just wanted to specify the band so you guys can see how we do this, and I just specified it to 5 gigahertz. Okay, so let's get into the script and take a look at what we have. So as usual, I have my if name main, which just checks if I have a main function in my script. If I have a main function in the script, it will just execute the main. If not, it will just not. It will just be a whole bunch of functions. We use that when you have different modules. In this case, I have a main, so I can go to my main. As usual, the first couple of lines here, I'm dealing with my arguments. So I define which arguments I need for the script. And it's always the same for this series of episodes. I'm just feeding my JSON config file, to the script, and that's all I do. So it has one parameter, and that's a config file. That's it. And then I load that config file into a Python dictionary that I call configs. And then I will, here in this case, I will call the function called create new WLAN that I have right here at the top. And then this function will retrieve, or will send me the ID of that newly created WLAN. Okay, and then as an argument to the function, I have my configs, right? So the Python dictionary, so I can retrieve all the information I have in my config.json file inside my function, so I can make my API call and so on. Okay, so let's get into the main function. So here, if I go to create new WLAN, as you can see, we're going to use the post, and we're going to use that specific URL. Okay, so site. And then we have to specify the site ID and then WLAN. Okay. Along with that call, we have to specify all the details that we have. We have to tell, MIST how we want to configure that specific SSID. So this is pretty much what I'm creating here at the beginning, right? So I'm creating a Python dictionary here. I'm setting the enable value to true. I'm setting the apply to site. And if you wonder where I got those values from, same, it's from the API documentation. So if I go back to my API documentation, right here, if I scroll down a little bit under that specific section, it will list all the all the parameters, okay? And then here, I can take the enable parameter, and I know it's a Boolean. So if I want the SSID to be enabled right off the bat when I create it, I can just set the enable here to true, and then it will enable it right off the bat. Okay, apply to, same here. You're gonna, if you look through it, you're gonna have the apply to, and then you can apply to different things. In this case, I want to apply it to my site. And then for the authentication, as you can see, it's a little bit more complex, because the authentication is actually, if I go here to authentication, it's actually an object, and in the object you're going to specify different parameter. And here, if you go back to the top here, if I scroll up, they show you a couple of examples, and that's what I've used to build my my call. So I've used this type PSK, and here you can see that the authentication is actually nested, and you have pretty much a new element here, right? And then in this element you have the PSK key and the value and the pairwise and the values, and I'm looking for the password. Oh, right here, the PSK, the password, and the type is PSK. Okay, so that's the minimum that you have to do here. So that's pretty much what I did here. I specified the type to be, whatever the type is in my config file. So in my case, it was PSK, and then I configured the PSK to whatever the PSK I had defined in my config file, which was SemFio1234 exclamation mark in my config file. Okay, then I configure the host name underscore IE to being whatever I have in my config file, so true again. And then here, if I go back to the list of parameter, you'll see that you have that. Here you go, hostname underscore IE, right? And then what I'm doing is I'm specifying the two last thing is the name. It's actually not name, it's SSID. The SSID is pretty much the name for your WLAN profile, right? So here I'm specifying to whatever SSID name I have here. And then the band, I'm specifying the band that I have in my config file, okay? I'm actually gonna modify my config file and then I'm gonna change this prod, boom. Let's make it serious here. And then, so next time we run it, we'll have a different SSID and I'll show you the difference. Then what I do is I dump all this, all this data, I dump it into a JSON format, right? That we're gonna call data post, and that's what we're gonna send along our API. So Mist can actually understand what we're sending. Mist is expecting JSON, so that's why we have to convert this beautiful Python dictionary into a JSON text, and we use the JSON.dump function to do that. We imported the JSON module at the beginning that allows us to do this. Then we specify our Mist URL, right? So here we have to specify, the Mist API URL. This is what I have right here. So that's the very beginning of our URL that you have right here. Then after that, we have to specify sites and slash. So that's what you have right here, sites slash. Then we have to specify our site ID. And that's what I'm doing here with 1, which corresponds to this variable, which is in my config site ID. So this guy here. And then after that, I have to specify /WLANs. Okay, so now we have our full URL. We have the data we want to send alongside this URL, and we have our headers. Just as usual, headers are the same. We specify that we, expecting content type to be JSON, and we specify our token for authorizations, and then we can send our API call. In this case, it's a post, right? So we use the request module that I have imported here at the beginning that allows you to send API calls, and we're sending a post API call, so we have to specify the URL that we've just defined here, the data, which is everything we've defined right here, and then the headers that we have defined right here. Okay, and so we send that, and we're pretty much asking Mist to create our new SSID in that specific site. Okay, then we get a response, and we analyze the response. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the response, What I'm doing here is I'm taking all the data from the response and I'm putting it into a variable called new WLAN, and this is the content of the response, okay? Then I'm checking if the status of the response is good, if everything is okay. If it's okay, it should be 200, which is the HTML code for everything went well. Then I'm just gonna print a message saying that the SSID was created, everything was fine. If not, I'm gonna print the error message, and then I return the ID of the newly created WLAN. Okay. So that's pretty much here. What I'll do is I'll uncomment these two guys so you can actually see what I'm doing here is I'm showing you the response. And actually, I think I already have it here. The new site response, it's actually the same. As you can see, this guy is the same as this guy. So I'm just gonna remove this, and then I'm going to change the variable over here. Doing this live while I record WLAN, so we can actually see the answer that we get from Mist, right? And we can analyze all the data we get back. We might be able to use some of the data that we get back for other purposes if you do like a more in-depth Python script. So let's try to see what we get. So I'm going to save this. I've changed the config file here, as you can see, to to change to create a new SSID name. So just to make sure that I don't have, a SSID that already exists. And then just to recap, we're building our API here under these lines. We're building the URL right here. We're adding our headers right here. And here we're building the data that we want to send alongside our post API call. So Mist has all the data necessary to create our SSID profile, right? Including name, band, and so on. Then here we get the response. We analyze the response. If everything is okay, we just tell the user everything is okay, and the SSID was created. Okay, so let's run the script again. So I'm just going to run the script again, right? Create WLAN. And here we see that we get all the, that's the data we get back from Mist. So as you can see, we get, different variables. We can see the authentication, the PSK, the type, the band, when it got created, is it enabled? We get the hostname ID, IE, we get the ID, interfaces, all. You could specify different VLANs if you wanted to. And this is pretty much it. This is what we get. So it's a very simple SSID. We didn't go crazy here. We didn't configure any profile and VLAN and so on, right? You could go way crazier. We didn't use radius or anything like this. So it's very simple, but the point here is just to show you, how you can create it, which API call you need, and what you could expect to get back from the Mist API. Okay, and here you can see that I have created my new SSID, right? And if I go back to the previous script that we showcased in the previous episode that lists all your WLANs, and I run in again the Python list WLAN. Here I should see the two SSID that I've just created. Let me clean up it here, run it again. So here you can see I have the SemFio lab and I have the SemFio prod that I've just created alongside all the other guys that I've had beforehand. Okay, and if I go back to my GUI, if I go back to my GUI here and I refresh, you'll see I have my lab and my prod SSID. Okay, so that's nice, that's cool. That would be very useful if you have to create a whole bunch of SSID, or if you have to create a whole bunch of sites with a whole bunch of SSID. You can just loop, create all your sites, and while you create your sites, create your SSID, assign those SSIDs to the sites, and it will save you a whole bunch of time if you have this need in specific projects. Last thing I wanted to show you is take a look at the API documentation and take a look at the other parameters that you could specify under SSID. If I go back all the way at the top here, one that's interesting is the radius. So if you use 802.1x for the authentications, you can specify all of your radius authentication within your SSID profile. So as you can see here, they have everything you would need. You can change the port, the secret for the radius server, the IP address of the radius server, and I actually want to show you an example that we can have here. Right here, you see you have your radius, the ports, the server, the name, is it enable? So you have an example right here. And it's going to be under authentication server. So when you do this, you have to be careful of how all the things are nested together. So I usually use those those examples, those output examples, to just create my data on my JSON format. I just copy whatever they have, and so I know exactly that Mist will be. I'm going to be sending exactly what Mist is expecting of me. Okay. Last thing I want to show you is you can actually, as you can see here, you can mess with the data rates. So if you want to have different data rates, minimum data rates available, you can set those inside your SSID profile as well. Okay. Along with captive portal, anything you could do pretty much via the GUI, you can do via the API. Okay. So I hope this video was useful for you guys. hope you could see how you can, start to put all the pieces together and maybe create your own script for your own need. If you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you don't want to miss out on any upcoming videos that I will be posting in this series of episodes. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.